this panel looks to me like Amazing Man in Film. So, segue to that, we have Scott Macaulay, who is the editor of Filmmaker magazine, who is going to introduce the panelists. Each one of them is a powerhouse of its own, and will lead what I'm sure is going to be a really interesting and eye-opening panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the panel is the changing face of independent film, and just quickly from my left, Director Rick Linklater, Director Ira Sachs, John Sloss from Cinetic, and Peter Zura from Big Beach.
I think that's the reality, and just to be clear, I mean, the independent film model we're all talking about that started in the 80s, that's the economic model that made it kind of mainstream. I mean, people have been making independent films forever, you know, and if you think it, you know, people in the 60s, 70s, Shirley Clark, John Cassavetes, all those wonderful films, they didn't have anything. They showed at a library, a couple film festivals, student film societies. That was sort of the model up until there was some success in the 80s, and then people realized they could make money off it, and we saw this inflation. That's right around the time I was, you know, getting interested in film, and so I've seen that whole evolution up until what you mentioned is just kind of studio light, you know, and the worst thing is, you know, those films are really expensive and they need a lot of P&A, and, you know, the whole indie notion was, you saw it slowly just kind of going away, and I saw it coming a long time ago. Just, I remember talking at film schools from the 90s, you know, I said, well, how many of you, you know, you're talking to a bunch of young people excited about cinema, how many of you want to be, you know, writers and directors? Every hand goes up. How many of you want to be, you know, distributors? You know, I never saw a hand. For like 20 years, I never saw that hand. And so here we are, you know, 3 distributors, 8,000 films.
I'll just pipe in. I guess for me, one of the things I've learned over 20 years of trying to do this is that as soon as I try to differentiate between the different supposed roles as a filmmaker, one being a producer, one being a writer, one being a director, one being a distributor, when I start to kind of farm those out too far, then things don't work the way that I want them to, for one thing, but they also tend not to work as well. So that the closer I've gotten to thinking like someone, I mean, not to compare myself to Orson Welles, but to think of someone like Orson Welles or P.T. Barnum, people who are creating something in which they understand the own engine of how to get it into the world, I think it's not only necessary, I actually think it creates an investment of the artist in the work, which adds a kind of energy to the work itself.
I've been saying for a number of years that the only difference between me and a card table and 3 other guys and a studio specialized distribution division is their pay TV output deal. You know, the output deal they have with HBO, Starz, or Showtime. And that appeared to be somewhat proven when Bob Yari hired a bunch of guys to take out the film The Illusionist a few years ago, and it grossed $40+ million in North America, and and he basically created Ad Hoc, his own distribution company. The assets of that company are now being sold in bankruptcy, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But
I've seen that world get farther away from the kind of films we're talking about. They just, every few years, it feels like they slice off another genre. They give up something. It's like, oh, it's a period piece? Okay, well, we'll let our specialty division do. Oh, it's got someone who's got an IQ over 100? Okay, that's an art film. You know, oh, it's got, you know, it just, they've thrown out these films. So what they're left with is, you know, the obvious franchise. They do that really well. They spend a lot. They spend a lot marketing them, and they hit the target. It's a good business model for them. I think they figured it out. You know, I know these guys. You know, they're heads of studios. They've got shareholders. They've got all kinds of pressure, and they have to make all the Harry Potters and the Batmans and all. You know, they love movies, but that's the business model that keeps their company. You know, it's just pure free market capitalism, and those films that required them to be, I like this word, execution dependent. They had to be good. Oh, that's really dangerous, you know.
It's sort of the movie star open film has been repudiated, and you've got The Hangover, which is a better film because it doesn't have any movie stars in it. You've got District 9. I mean, maybe this is an indication of some kind of movement back to, something essential rather than just the commodification of celebrity or whatever. But yeah.